welcome to another episode of Crunch Time Movie Reviews. Today I'm going to cover the brand new Pixar film Soul. This is going to be a little different than some of my other reviews, as I've just seen this movie for the first time, and because it just came out, and I really had no previous knowledge or exposure, which may make this review a little less biased, as I haven't seen any other opinions or reviews of this movie. Despite this, I will still be using the same 4 categories to judge the film: story, characters, animation, and music. But first I'll start off with a quick plot summary. Joe Gardner is a middle school band director in New York City who has larger aspirations of becoming a famous jazz musician. However, once Joe gets his dream gig, he has a near-death experience which transports him to the afterlife. He is sure this is a mistake and frantically tries to make it back to Earth. To make it back, he will have to help a defiant soul known as 22 find their purpose. Will Joe be able to make it back to Earth in time for his performance, and will 22 find a purpose? Find out in Pixar's Soul. Now I'm going to take a look at some of the elements I both liked and disliked with the story of this film. First of all, I thought the pacing and sequencing of events was very good all throughout. The movie has 3 main acts, and each of them felt impactful, but none of them overstayed their welcome, and they felt like they went on for a pretty good length. The first act is the exposition, where we get to see Joe going through his everyday life. Once he nearly dies, however, we get to see the afterlife and the great beyond. This is where we meet 22, who Joe has to help find her passion. But Joe just wants to get back to his life on Earth, so he finds a way to get entry back to Earth. However, when this happens, 22 is accidentally put into his body, and Joe's soul is put into the body of a cat. Now our second act begins, where Joe, as the cat, is having to direct 22 through his life. This act is the largest and takes up a good portion of the movie. 22 is finally getting to experience Earth, while Joe begins to see things from a different perspective, watching himself interact with others through the point of view of a cat, and I would imagine this would be a pretty jarring experience, seeing someone else operate in your body. However, his main goal is still just to get back into his body so he can play his show. That's the only thing he's really worried about. Joe and 22 manage to make it back to the great before. I'll avoid going into much detail for the rest of this act for obvious spoiler reasons, but the third and final act focuses on Joe getting back into his body and being able to play his gig with a new perspective on life, and then a little conclusion to 22's story. Another aspect of this film I enjoyed was the theme and message. The messages of family, making every moment count, and finding your spark or passion were a lot deeper than most kids' films or many movies actually get, which made it easier for older audiences to enjoy. At some points, it seems like the movie was even meant for an older audience rather than kids, which is different than most Pixar films. These themes were well portrayed throughout most of the movie. For instance, Joe seems unhappy at the start of the film, but once he sees 22 experiencing Earth for the first time, he learns to enjoy the simpler moments more and just simple interactions through his daily life. While these themes are good, they're also quite ambitious, like I said, for a kids' film, which led to one negative I have with the story. The end of the film felt a little rushed, and the movie was scrambling to fill in plot holes and kind of find conclusions to these themes. Personally, I think adding an extra 15 to 20 minutes onto the end of the film to help wrap it up could have really helped make the end more satisfying. It's just a minor complaint, but it's something I personally had. Now I'm going to take a deeper look at the characters in this film. Our main protagonist, as I've said before, is Joe Gardner, a middle school band director aspiring to be a jazz pianist. He appears discontent with his life and job until he gets his dream gig, after which he turns very excited and overjoyed, and you can really see the enthusiasm he has. Then his mood is changed again once he has a near-death experience, and it makes it to the great before. He becomes very impatient and worried, and he really can't wait to make it back because he just got his big break, and now it's looking like it's going to be taken from him. Back when they get back to Earth, Joe undergoes his real character change during the film while he's experiencing things through a cat's body. As I said before, he becomes more appreciative and aware of everyday interactions while watching someone else perform them in his body. I believe that Joe is a quality main character, as he is shown as just a regular guy who everyone in the audience can relate to in some form. His character change is done well, and I think everybody will be rooting for Joe by the end. 22 is our other main character for a majority of the film. She is kind of a belligerent and reckless soul who doesn't want to go to Earth or really find a passion. She is fine just living in the Great Before as a soul. She's introduced to Joe, who is tasked with helping find her passion. At this point in the film, I didn't really enjoy 22's character. She was kind of over-the-top annoying and incredibly dislikable. That is kind of the point behind her character, but I just didn't really like it. However, once she was put into Joe's body, she started to change for the better. Watching her figure out how Earth works was interesting and entertaining, especially with Joe guiding her as a cat. 22 changes a little more at the end of the film, but I will leave that out for spoiler reasons. Overall, 22's character, while obnoxious at the start of the film, evolves into an interesting character that plays off of Joe well, and I really liked their interaction throughout the film. Up next we have Jerry. Jerry isn't really one character, but a collection of characters that all look similar and have the same voice, kind of like clones. They're the guardians of the souls in the Great Before that lead them to help find their passion. The Jerrys honestly aren't in the film for a whole lot and don't do a whole lot, but they do add another layer of depth to the universe, which I enjoyed, and they still added something to the story. There isn't really a true villain in this story, but Terry is the closest thing we get. Terry is different than Jerry, but is still a worker in the Great Before, but kind of the opposite to the Jerry, the antithesis to the Jerrys. Terry spends most of the movie trying to bring Joe back to the afterlife so he can die, because Terry counts all the dead, makes sure they're all accounted for, and he doesn't like that Joe made it back to Earth when he was supposed to be dead. Overall, Terry isn't really a villain or a bad guy in this film, but is a good addition that causes problems for Joe and 22. Those are really the only main characters in this film that are prevalent for more than a few scenes. I won't discuss all of the little minor characters in this video for time's sake, but there are many more that bring this world to life and really flesh out the story and are really necessary. Now I'm going to cover the animation and art style. I've said this in my previous Pixar reviews, but the animation is always spectacular in Pixar films, and it's no different in Soul. I especially enjoyed the contrast between the Great Before and the real-world animation. The animation, when we were in New York City, made it feel alive and really bustling with activity, which gave a very real feel to the environment. The colors also involved a lot of gray, black, some yellow, just very gritty. And the Great Before, however, had a lot softer feel with lots of blue and purple colors, and I think this really helps mold the contrast between the two. And the shapes in the Great Before were also very simple. For instance, the Jerrys and Terry were based off minimalist Picasso paintings. All in all, I really enjoyed the art style, and it was definitely one of my favorite aspects to this film. Finally, I'm going to cover the music in Soul. With Joe being a jazz musician and someone who plays music a lot, there's a definite theme of music throughout. The soundtrack is a compilation of music from three people: Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and Jon Batiste. I quite enjoyed the jazz sound and feel, especially because jazz as a genre isn't normally seen in film. The scenes where Joe was playing the piano were especially great, and the music really shone. My personal favorite was a scene after Joe does his performance when he's back at his house or apartment where he was playing by himself. It was one of the most powerful scenes of the movie, and that was thanks to the music. The music was also great at accompanying the feel of New York City and the Great Before. As I said before, there's a definite contrast, and the music really helped to show that. In recap, the music in Soul definitely didn't disappoint and brought a new level to the emotion of the story. In conclusion, Pixar's 2020 film Soul told the compelling story of Joe Gardner that was expertly accompanied by the music and animation. While the themes were a little ambitious at times, the film was still impressive, which is why I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Crunch Time Movie Reviews. Make sure to leave any comments or suggestions below, and I will see you next time. Thank you.